What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us today. I'm super excited to air this one. We've got Glen Sloutsky in the house today. He's featured in articles in Toronto Life, Toronto Star. He's been on morning shows and in multiple newspapers, and it's about his fight with Tiny Township and their short-term rental bylaws. He's going to go through the cost of these bylaws, the restrictions of these bylaws, how they're squeezing property owners and more specifically cottage owners out of the market by limiting their income. It's a restrictive bylaw and he's fighting it in provincial court. You're going to love everything he needs to say. These bylaws are the most restrictive and expensive bylaws in the whole country, and he's here to talk all about it. So without further ado, we've got Glen Sloutsky. I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. As discussed, today we have Glen Sloutsky here, and he's going to tell us all about the STRs in Tiny Township and his experience with the township. So Glen, I'm super excited to have you on here for today. I know I've wanted you on here for a little bit now, and finally we've got the time to connect. So I guess first off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Love the fact that we're going to have a long conversation. You can get deeper into topics. You can actually explore something in meaningful detail rather than just gloss over it. So looking forward to that. Glen Sloutsky. Professionally, I'm a management consultant, have been for about 20 years with various firms. Personally, married, 3 kids. Part of the reason why we wanted to be in Tiny is to give the kids the opportunity to be at a cottage, to be close to nature, to be close to the beach. And interestingly enough, back in 2020, we were living in Toronto.
Are you born and raised Toronto?
No, I was born in the former Soviet Union, if you will, so Kiev in Ukraine. Raised there until I was 15, and then hopped and immigrated to Toronto. So when I was teenage years, this is difficult years.
So you did high school in Canada?
High school here, I learned the language.
So you didn't know English before?
You get some English education, like you would French here, I guess, or even less than that. So it would be very, very basic. So you had to learn it pretty much from scratch.
Okay, cool. So that's like the Canadian dream.
For sure. Okay. And so, interestingly enough, you're a real estate guy.
Yeah.
But from my early beginnings, I never really believed in real estate as an asset. So we can talk about that.
Yeah, sure.
2003, I recall, my mom wanted to buy a house, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, it's the prices are so high now. 2003.
Had she owned before?
No.
So this is cool.
Well, she had a condo, but I think she wanted to upgrade from a condo to a house. I'm like, 2003, prices are way too high. Look at it, the house is $350,000. How are you going to afford it? And for years since then, I was a staunch opponent of investing in real estate.
Okay, good.
And then I was wrong every freaking single time. And then when the U.S. real estate crashed in 2009, 2008. I'm like, all right, see, watch this. I was right, and Canada never followed, and just continued to rise and rise and rise. And I admitted defeat. Yes, finally in the close to 2020. But at that point, the prices have skyrocketed, so I was kind of priced out of real estate. And so the option that my wife and I then started to explore is, okay, what if we get a cottage as our first investment? Yeah. Prices were relatively reasonable back then, and you can afford it. But of course, as you know, cottages are a bit of a cost sink, and then you just kind of throw money at it. And so, kind of trying to figure out how to make it work, how to pay the mortgage. We were up at Blue Blue Mountain at her uncle's place in February of 2020. So remember what was happening in February of 2020. And he kind of took us to Wasaga and we said, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a place out here and come up here for the summer and spend the time. And so we just caught the bug in February of 2020. And as soon as we really caught the bug, we started looking and started to do some research. And guess what? Wasaga does not allow SDRs.
Yeah.
Neither does Collingwood. So we're like, all right, what's the proximate jurisdiction that does? And we looked up in Tiny and went on their website and says, the rental of a dwelling is fully permitted and you can rent out your place. And there were some articles at the time where Tiny was different than Wasaga and others who have implemented these bans. So we're like, all right, Tiny it is. So next week we started doing research. The first listing that we saw, really liked, went to see it, put an offer in, bought it. Boom.
Done.
It's
funny how quick it is sometimes.
Right? A week after. So that was, I think, February 29th that we put the offer in. It was a leap year, and then closing March 31st.
And the cool thing about that point in time in real estate was people were very similar to you. Was because we didn't shut down in 2020 till like March, right? Mm-hmm. And I can remember during that time, people would message me on my social and be like, "There you go, the market's going to crash. You guys have had it good for so long." And in my head, I'm like, "Well, maybe," And I had sellers panicking, so they took a little less for their houses. They sold and got moving. And then as soon as we hit springtime of 2020, it didn't stop until March 2022. So,
yeah, it was a weird time. So we had to close with the lawyer via Zoom.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And show your driver's license to the camera. Anyway, so we got possession March 31st, and we kind of stayed. We never moved out because the city kind of shut down. You're better off being in cottage country, fairly large lot, and away from neighbors, and we were on our own bubble. And so that was our experience. We spent a whole lot of time in 2020 there and kept spending time since then. But of course, the idea was that you would then supplement, not income but cost coverage through renting it. And so that was always in the cards, always part of the purchase objective. And we started doing that in, I guess, the summer of 2020. Right, just making sure that we abide by the regulations on who can travel where, and then kept renting it every year until the bylaw came in 2023. I think 2022 officially was passed, and 2023 was the first year it was active. Yeah.
So we had a similar experience. We built, but we were like, cottage culture in Ontario is like. It's the number one thing you have to do, right? So for me, we never had a cottage growing up, but that was always on my mind, right? My wife's family always had one, but we had gone around very similar, but it was like, a little more than just one and done. Kawarthas, we were Muskokas, down Lake Erie, like Long Point area, Kincardine, Port Elgin. So we would look all over, and then eventually my wife was like, this township gives us everything we want. My aunt's here, my parents' cottage is 40 minutes away. Let's buy here and build, because we were just too picky, and that's what we ended up doing. So
it's a beautiful area, right?
Yeah. So ours was 2021. It was at the end of 2021. It was built. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was great. So we like you said, for the cost, it still costs us money. It's just we were using the income to supplement everything.
That's right.
So
cottages are expensive, especially now, right? I don't know if your family bought 20, 30, 40 years ago, but waterfront lots were going for $20,000-$30,000. Yeah. Imagine that.
I know. That. And there is that long-standing cottage culture, generational cottage culture, right? My father-in-law always looks at these cottages, and he's a big advocate of cottages because he grew up with them, and he always says this one thing that always stands out to me, and it's like, you want a place where you've been there for 2 hours and it feels like you've been there for 2 days. A place where, like, as soon as you get there, it just melts away. And I always joke around. I'm like, yeah, the smell of like mothballs and mouse piss, right, of an old cottage. And he's like, whatever it is, it's the best feeling in the world. So for those of you guys out there that know, so go on. So with Tiny Township, and I can relate to this because I've had very similar experiences, emotions and all sorts of stuff throughout the process. Tell me what happened in Tiny Township specifically that's affected the STRs.
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint one single reason. I think there's a few things that went on. When COVID hit, people were not allowed to travel overseas, if you recall, right? And everybody got cabin fever here in Toronto, and they just wanted to get out and wanted to go and spend some time together with a family within their bubbles, whatever we used to call them. And there was like pent up energy just to vacation somewhere. And so cottage country became the destination then for people going out and having wild nights, crazy parties, because there was no opportunity to do that either in the city. Things were shut down, or overseas. And so I think what happened in 2020, 21 is some instances of noise, some instances of neighborhood disruption, and overcrowded cottages. I personally don't know of any instances, but that's the narrative that's been built up to justify the bylaw. The mayor came on and said the fabric of community is changing. You can interpret whatever that means.
I thought he said the culture, didn't he say it?
Kind of the fabric, whatever. The I think there is a YouTube video of him saying it, so we can verify what that is. But they felt like they were losing, I guess, that quiet, idyllic place in Tiny that used to exist for generations, and now it's being disturbed by people coming in and having loud parties. And so I think they wanted to cap that. The way they went about it is horrible.
And if that was the case, right, rightly so, right?
For sure. I mean, I don't think I'm opposed to regulation entirely. Our association is certainly not opposed to regulation. Just have to make it sensible. Like if there's safety issues, okay. If there are, clean water issues with septics, okay, let's talk about what that might be. But I think what the bylaw did ultimately, and we're going to talk about the details, is just clamp down things so stringently that it, I think overcorrected everything and just shut things down for most. Yeah.
And I think from my perspective is that, during COVID, okay, and that was a time where everything was turned right on its head, right? It really was. We never had, you had vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and where could you go? And you couldn't go to
masks, non-masks.
You couldn't play hockey, and you couldn't play in jungle gyms outside, and you couldn't go for so there was so much going on, and I can understand that area, waterfront, and people trying to get some sort of an enjoyment out of life at that point, that was really the only recreation that was available. So it makes sense that during COVID, that maybe they did notice, maybe we've got to control this a little bit more. And I think that's probably brought this on. But now that everything's dissipated and we're going back to normal here, there's no need for any of that stuff anymore. And I think that's kind of the difference between what's happening. They're so far into the process and they've spent so much money. Now they've got to almost do it. But that's my kind of thoughts, where I can understand things getting a little out of hand during COVID. But now we don't have the issue anymore. There's no problem, and we're still having these restrictions. It would be like still limiting people from getting together in groups, right, in the worry that COVID's going to come back.
Gosh, I think we're 5.5 feet apart.
Yes,
we should move our chairs apart.
That's right. Yeah,
6 feet. I agree with that partially.
Yeah.
The point that I kind of, I'm maybe not with you there is bylaws existed to control all of the bad behaviors already. They were on the books.
Yeah.
Is there too much noise? You can charge me with a bylaw that controls noise.
Yeah.
Is there a garbage problem? You can charge me with a bylaw that controls garbage. All the things that supposedly were problematic with people coming in were already managed by existing bylaws.
Yeah.
So the question is, like, why are you bringing in another bylaw to control things that are already being controlled by other regulations?
Yeah.
And the answer is those regulations were not really enforced.
Yeah.
The bylaw department of Tiny would turn a blind eye. Maybe they couldn't cover it. Maybe they had too few people to control the number of properties. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Maybe there's a staffing shortage. But you could figure out how to allocate your resources to go after the most problematic, either properties or parties, so it's owners, renters, whoever.
Increase staff, whatever.
But if the community is really worried about this problem, community should be able to pay for enforcement of correcting that problem.
And essentially, like if you look at Tiny, there's like, a dedicated person that's full time to dedicated to STR. So they've already done that on the other side, as opposed to let's beef up your bylaw enforcement and maybe increase the ticket or do something like that, right?
Exactly. And then the key question again that we'll come back to probably in discussing the bylaw is, who is at fault here? Is it the renter, the organizer of the party, or is it the owner who opened up their home to that person?
Yes.
Who do you go after?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you rented a car from a car rental place and you run a red light, or you, God forbid, hit somebody, it's not the rental car company that's at fault, right? It's the person who's driving the car. Mm-hmm. So, very, very similar analogy could be made here for the house. It's not the house owner that should be responsible. It's the person who is exhibiting the wrong behavior that should be responsible for it.
Yeah. And of course, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we'll talk about the AMPs, because it's like the red light camera. If somebody drives your car and gets a speeding ticket and gets a red light camera or a speed camera, you get the ticket, not the person driving the car. And that's to me that's problematic, because the person that's actually dealing with the infraction isn't getting dinged. And I always looked at these bylaws where, why wouldn't they have a registration process where, you'd, with an ID, who's ever renting it, you'd register that person, whether it's with the town or whoever. And then if there is an issue, that's the person that's liable for any noise complaints, any garbage complaints. And I do agree with you. Like, what's the percentage of short-term rental owners or cottage renters versus the ones who are the delinquents? Is it 95% or, great, and the 5% are ruin it for everybody? Or how does that work? Like, do they have any numbers on that?
They should have done it differently to actually get numbers. What the town officials told us is that they estimated that there were 600 to 700 SDRs in Tiny at the peak of 2020, 2021. Mm-hmm. And we know that, again, they told us that there's about a handful, let's call it 5 or 6 problematic properties. So that's less than 0.1 of 1%. So
wow.
Forget about 99. I mean, sorry, it's 99, I guess. So
1%.
1%, less than 1% of properties. And you've created a bylaw now that affects the other 99.1% of people who just want to rent out a cottage for a weekend. So talk about using nuclear bazooka to kill a fly.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, because even for us, like, the majority of people that rent their cottage out want somebody to respect that cottage. And even like, we don't rent out, we only rent out to families. We only rent out for a week basis, because that's what we want. We actually never used to advertise on Airbnb. We still don't. It's all like other websites, Cottages in Canada or something like that tends to get more families drawn to it. So like, So I think, I agree with you on that one, where the majority of people do care about the noise. They do care about their neighbors back and forth and all that, right?
For sure. And on Airbnb, so Airbnb is kind of the primary way by which they track whether you're renting or not. And if you're not renting through Airbnb, if you're renting privately, there's no way that they can actually find out whether you're renting or not. Although they did knock on our door a few times to say, "Hey, are you renting? Can you imagine that? Government comes onto your property and says, "Are you renting?"
Yeah.
No, we're the owners, first of all, and why is it any of your business?
Yeah.
But Airbnb has an inherent mechanism where you rate each other, and if you are a problematic renter, you'll get a bad review, and gosh forbid, you don't want to have a bad review. And if you're a problematic owner, or vice versa, you're going to get. So there's an inherent accountability. Everybody wants to actually be on their best behavior, not to get a bad review. If you're doing it privately, or if you're doing off the books, off the market, then there's no accountability, and things can go south very, very quickly. And so they should be promoting Airbnb rentals because of that. And there's liability that's attached. So Airbnb would cover you for up to $1 million if something goes wrong. There's insurance there. So there's a platform that's built to actually control a lot of the poor things that might happen. And they're going after that platform to chase people.
So let's jump into the actual bylaw, the restrictions, okay? So for everybody out there that doesn't know, Airbnb, Tiny Township is one of the most restrictive townships for short-term rentals in the country. Not just Ontario, but in the whole country. It's one of the most expensive, and it's one of the most grueling in terms of what your obligations are, how you can apply. So let's talk about that. The bylaw first came out, and it was easy. It's $500 to apply for this to apply for an STR, and it only allows X amount of people that can apply. So even if you have a cottage that you want to rent out, there's limited spots that will allow for an STR.
Correct.
And now it's jumped up to $750, right? Within a year and a half.
No, $1,500 to start off.
Okay.
Not 500. $1,500.
Okay.
And now it's $1,750.
$1,750. Okay, sorry, my mistake.
$1,750.
So $1,500 to start, $1,750 over the year and a half.
Correct.
Okay, and most people are thinking that it'll even increase yet again based on how much money they're putting into it.
Yeah, that's just the application fee, which, by the way, is non-refundable. So if you don't get your license, the township keeps money.
Yes.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
And there's an incident with somebody we know who applied, changed the ownership structure, and said, "Oh, hang on, I want to apply under the new owner." And they said, "So no, we're keeping your $1,500 at the time. You have to reapply again." They have, having done no work. For that $1,500. Anyway, so the barrier to get the license, just the financial barrier, is $1,750.
Okay.
Plus, there's a whole host of inspections that you have to do: electrical, wood burning appliance, fire, HVAC, exactly.
Septic.
Septic, probably septic. Yeah, mm-hmm. I'm not 100% sure, and that comes with costs, and so. We estimated that the total cost of applying is between $2,500 and $3,000. Some of them are every 5 years, but most of them are actually annual.
Annually, yeah.
Yeah, and so annually you have to pony up at least $2,500 to be able to rent your cottage.
Yeah.
Of course, once you do that, then you're bound by the terms of the bylaw. And let's talk about that.
Yeah. So just so everybody out there is aware, like when we say annually, it means that you do a fire inspection in 2025, then you've got to do another fire inspection in 2026, and then you got to have them come in 2027, even though nothing's changed. There's no,
Correct.
And when we had phoned about that, they had said, well, what if somebody takes the fire extinguisher off the walls? And I mean, what if? So like, if you're renting out your cottage on a monthly basis for a whole year, you don't need any inspections whatsoever. You don't need HVAC, you don't need septic, you don't need fire, you don't need electrical. And in our particular case, our place was brand new. And they had already, like, everything was just approved a year and a half prior. So it was like, it was a very interesting, because I said, well, geez, how do these other cottages that are 50 years old and 60 years old. How do they even approve them? Right? Like, so nevertheless, so it is, when you talk about like annual, you can understand doing it, maybe once every 5 years. And I know you're against it, but the annual portion of it is almost like that's their alternative to trying to bring money back into the community somehow.
I wish they were, that conniving. I think it was just do it. And there's not a whole lot of infrastructure for inspections in Tiny. So most of the people that come from Midland and from Wasaga. So it's not even feeding the mouths of Tiny residents. Where was I going with this? So that the financial portion is about $2,500. The electrical inspection that you mentioned, actually, it's every 5 years. But when the whole thing started, people would call around to electricians and say, "Can you do an inspection?" They had no idea what to do. Because what, you're going to rip off walls and look at the wiring? You're not going to do that. Yeah. So they just kind of look around and say, "Good," because you're not going to go behind the drywall. That's not going to happen. Yeah. So some of these are just ridiculous inspections. Now, like a wood burning appliance, if you've got a stove, you want to make sure that there's no creosote built up. It's working fine.
But there's a wet inspection for that anyways. They already have that.
Exactly. So just like my point before, there's a whole lot of bylaws and regulations already exist to do it. And there shouldn't be a difference whether you're renting it 27 days or shorter or 28 days or longer. Yeah. Because it's the same process of renting.
It's the same, yeah. And the same safety, right?
Same safety.
Like if they were going to do it for short-term rentals, then they should do it, in theory, I don't want to give them any ideas, but for every rental property in the township of Tiny.
They don't have the jurisdiction because the long-term rental bylaw is governed by the province.
Okay.
So they can't.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
As part of the Residential Tenancies Act, I think RTA is what governs long-term rentals and it completely has different.
So then the province is given. The province hasn't made a decision on short-term rentals. They've left it up to each individual township,
which is a big mistake, and we can talk about that. Okay. It's now a patchwork of very, very different regulations that are.
None of them are consistent.
None of them are consistent. Some are laissez-faire, and some of them are tiny. But I think your listeners would want to know what the actual bylaw restrictions are.
Go.
So let's go with that. So. Right off the bat, you can only rent for 92 days or less in a year. So
92 days.
92 days. Okay. Right? And so out of 365 days a year, not even half. So half would have been 182, which most kind of jurisdiction go, okay, because it's not the primary use, you have to rent it less than half a year. They just went to 92. Why 92, you ask?
You'll tell me.
There's a trail of evidence because the consultant that they hired to do this bylaw said, well, you know what? Most of the rentals are in the summer. The period from June 1st to August 31st is 92 days.
Wow.
That's what you're going to do. 92 days. So what? We're not renting in May?
Yeah.
Are we not renting in September, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's? Or are you not allowed? It's completely arbitrary.
Yes, it is.
Completely arbitrary. And I remember the debate that they were having in the council chambers on YouTube at the time. It was like, how long is a piece of string was the conversation. It was like, should we do 92 days? And somebody said, well, why not 120? Well, why not 70? Like, there's no basis to it.
Why not 365?
Why not 365? Why not 183? Like nothing. It was just shooting numbers, propping up lead balloons and seeing what comes out of it. And so they settled on 92 days without any evidence whatsoever, just the period between June 1st and August 31st. So that's one. Two, there's a minimal rental length. So between April 15th, I think, and October 15th, you can only rent for, I believe, 5 or 6 nights minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So
6 nights, I think.
So if you think about it, you can't rent on a weekend. You can't go to Tiny legally and rent a cottage for the weekend unless you're paying for 6 days. And nobody rents for 6 days in the off season.
Yeah.
Right. So people come with kids. Kids are in school up until the end of June. I don't think we've had a rental week in June ever, or in May. And so all you've done is just kind of completely killed weekend tourism for people to come up in the shoulder seasons between April. And why is it April 15th to October 15th? Because the parking regulations are that. Again, without any connection to reality. Why would you line it up with parking regulations? Every house, part of the zoning bylaw actually requires you to have parking on the short-term rental site. So people are not really parking on the beaches; they're parking by the property. So no weekend rentals, and really binds you into week-long slots in the bottom half of the year between October and April. You can rent for weekends, but you can't rent more than every 5, I think, days or 6 days.
So it's the same thing.
So it's the same thing, but you can rent for the weekend, but you can't rent on the Monday following that.
Yeah.
You can only rent for the next weekend. Yeah. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, at that point, they're like, they're restricting the homeowner from doing that, and then the other way they're restricting the potential tenant. So, renter, correct. And I always looked at that as, affordability for a lot of people isn't really there. So if somebody wants to go up, even in the summer, I know a lot of people just, even landlords will rent just for weeks in the summer. It makes sense. But there are some that do weekends, and for the affordability for people coming, they can only afford from Friday night to Sunday night. Exactly. And so it limits as well. Not only does it limits the class of person, almost like it limits the economically where they stand, and those people now can't enjoy a weekend at a cottage anymore because the township has restricted only a week or not a weekend.
Correct. Very exclusionary, not by design. I don't think it's by design, but by effect.
Yes. Yeah, like it's as a consequence of. So that might not have been their intention, but the consequence is still the consequence.
Correct.
Okay.
So then you get into restrictions around number of people. So only 2 people per bedroom, up to a maximum of 5 bedrooms. Mm-hmm. And the way they count bedrooms is, funny math. For example, we've got a place that has 4 bedrooms and a basement with a pull-out couch. One of the basement bedrooms is huge. It's like almost the entire house. And so we have bunk beds in there. We have a couple of queen beds in there, so it actually can comfortably fit 6 people. And a lot of people prefer that because they want to sleep with their kids in the same room, right? Yeah. Or there's we've had, even in our gatherings, kids go to the basement.
Yes.
They love sleeping.
Destroy it.
Well, it's pretty bare, so there's not much to destroy. But kids stay there and adults stay upstairs, and so. You've got now restrictions of how many people you can have per bedroom, which they justify by saying, well, the septic
capacity
system can't handle it. Well, there's a lot of debate and pros and cons, but think about it. If you're only renting 92 days or even 180 days, some portion of the year, there's time for the system to flow out the refuse and empty out. So you're actually using the property much less than a full-time tenant would use it.
Yeah. And not only that, though, it's saying it's ultimately saying that it's okay if it's you and you have your family out, and it's the homeowner's family that has the bunk beds, but it's not okay if it's a renter doing that. And that's part of the cottage culture here. Like I remember distinctively renting cottages when we were younger and having rooms like that with bunk beds, and all the kids are there and the parents are yelling at them to shut up and go to sleep and turn the lights off and stop watching the TV. And now, it's so compartmentalized where you have one room, doesn't matter the size, 2 people, that's it. And I think that, I think it's doing it once again, it's going back to affordability, right? And now all of a sudden for homeowners, they're trying to cover some of their costs are they either the same or they go up, and people can't have as many families in there. So if you can have, sometimes people will have 3 families for a weekend, and that makes the affordability factor great.
Of course. Our place is large enough to have 16 people. We as a family have had 16, 18 people in there. And so you're absolutely right. 3 or 4 families, most of them actually multi-generational. So we've got grandparents coming in. We've got the kids of the grandparents. We've got the children running around. So it becomes a family event, right? And you can split it 3 ways, 4 ways sometimes. So it becomes much more affordable. So it becomes, a vacation for a family is $1,000, $1,500, which is very, very, very good, very affordable for a house next to the beach and a 1 week long family vacation. You can never get that in the Caribbean.
Yes.
So people then tend to seek out those properties that can house a lot of people and have families close together. We of course try to limit our clientele to families. We don't want big parties. We don't want big bachelor parties. Like, it's not, sometimes people with lots of reviews and great feedback on Airbnb will say, listen, we're going to be respectful. We've had church groups. We just want to get together and we haven't seen each other for a long time. Sure.
Yeah.
But we do try to screen out for families. Back to your point about exclusion. Here's the absurd effect of this bylaw. You have 2 houses side by side, identical in every way. Okay? You've got the exact number of people in those 2 houses. You've got the exact sound of music coming out from those 2 houses. You've got the exact same garbage, whatever. Identical circumstances. One of them is completely legal, and one of them is completely illegal, based solely on status.
Yes.
Because one is the owner, one is the renter.
Yeah.
So it's not the actual physical attributes of the activity that is being regulated. Mm-hmm. It's the status of the person, which I think is the biggest problem with this bylaw. Why would you regulate status? And by regulating status, owner versus renter, you're now excluding a whole bunch of people, be it economically challenged, be it newcomers, be it those that can't afford to own the Canadian dream but can only have a taste of it sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, and I would agree, and I would question, like, where does it stop? Right? You can make amendments to a bylaw anytime. So now all of a sudden everybody's applying, and we're going to say, okay, it's not 92 days now, it's 62 days.
Stopping them from doing
and with all the hoops that you have to jump through, I honestly think that once again is excessive. You mentioned those 2 families. Well, like, one cottage has to have electrical every single year, HVAC every single year, and the other place doesn't. They can do the exact same things in those properties, but you're right, it's just the owner versus the tenant, right? Yeah. But the other thing is if they, like, whenever you have a government municipal bylaw come in, it's like, well, there's always like, what about this? What about the septic? What about the electrical? What about and they have to cover all these bases instead of saying, like, you've got insurance on your property, right? Your insurance covers your wood burning appliance. You've had your wet inspection done, and so once again, it's like now all of a sudden every single year all that stuff has to be regulated, when normally, and even a normal renter, like not just a short-term rental, but if you had a 12-month rental, none of that applies.
Yep.
None of it.
Yep.
Right? And it's just, all it's doing now is squeezing the landlords to either sell their house, right? Or, the alternative is fight it in court. So are there any other restrictions right offhand that you can think of?
I wish I had the paper with me, but it's so number of days, number of renters, number of bedrooms, number of licenses. So you're only allowed in the township 300 licenses. So, you could see if they admitted to have
600 to
700 and they only allowed 300 licenses, that is, by definition, excluding a whole bunch of people that could have applied for a license. They justified that by saying, well, if 600 applied on November, whatever it was, 1st of 2022 to get licenses, we would have issued the 600 licenses, and then we would have winnowed that down. But you know what? People didn't know whether they wanted to apply. People didn't have the timing right. Maybe they said, no, I'm not going to do it this year, but I might want to do it this year. But they've cut off basically at least 300. And lately there's only been about 150, 160 licensed properties. So they've cut off 450 to 500 properties from the market or forced them to go underground.
Yeah. So not only is it restrictive, they've squeezed that to a point where it's not even manageable based on what their numbers were.
Correct.
Right.
The way they should have done it, Tyler, is, and this is my management consulting hat going on. If I was asked to give advice to a municipality how to do it, I would say start a registration program first. So January 1st, whatever year, say everybody who operates a short-term rental register and pay us $100 registration fee. Pretty easy, straightforward. Yes, I am renting, because maybe the municipality wants to know who is actually renting, so they can track patterns of behavior that they want to regulate. So by that point, at the end of the year, of that first year, they will have known exactly who exists there to, short-term rental versus not. They would have gained some revenue right off the bat without actually having to do any work. And most importantly, they would have had the data to say, yes, short-term rentals do pose a larger problem than regular renters, because now you have an isolated pool of addresses that you can go and say, did we have more noise issues in the pool? Did we have more garbage issues in the pool? And so by the end of the year, you will have made some progress in terms of the evidence that's required to create a bylaw, right? Yeah. And then you could have said, okay, here are the stats. Short-term rentals create 20% more noise or 30% more noise. So we actually need to do something about it, and then create a regime that would have gone to address it, with the objectives of either, again, reducing nuisance, reducing disturbance, reducing the changing of the fabric, however you want to define that. They didn't do that. They just kind of rolled out the most strictest regime, maybe addressing the COVID concerns as we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I can understand, like, it's almost a fear tactic from the municipality by, like, as opposed to saying, like, our renters are families that come up for like even at our place, 3 years in a row, right? They enjoy this place, they treat it with respect. Or saying, the 1% that are partying and puking on the street and kicking over garbage cans and all that, well, then they should have the bylaws and the police called on them and things like that. Mm-hmm. I would agree with you on that, the registration. I would even go further that, you register the person that's actually, you have a registration, and then you register the actual tenant that's coming in there. And then that tenant, the information's on file. So if there are complaints from the bylaw, then that's the person that they can charge. And with the funds from the registration, then they can hire another bylaw enforcement officer to really put some pressure on these guys. All right, where they might, maybe they have first complaint is $500. The second complaint is $5,000. I don't know, but you're like, if there's only 1%, it's clearly not the cottage owners that are like wild west. It's that 1% that's looking for the party. Absolutely. Which I think ever since we've had cottages, that's been the case. And maybe Airbnb allows you more frequency, but the people that are for this bylaw are automatically looking at it, and in my opinion, are kind of saying, it's like we never used to rent out cottages before. Like that's kind of like all this trend. Yes, all of a sudden, like ever since COVID, people rent out cottages. Like for years, people rented it. It's part of our culture, right? And if it affects people economically or newcomers coming to Canada, it's clearly being seen here. Like some of the people that have been charged the most are newcomers coming to Canada, and whether that's the intent. But it's clearly having an effect that way. And I think that there's no looking back. It's like, okay, we've even in my business, right? If we price it too high, I would say something like, hey guys, I think we've overshot this price. Now we need to adjust to what's happening. There's none of that here. And the old cottage owners, these generational cottage owners, I feel are the ones who are really fighting back. And those guys are okay. They've had, 2 or 3 generations, and they've inherited these cottages. And now even a generation now, they're tearing these old ones down, they're retiring, and then they're moving up there. So they're there more frequently, they're noticing more things. Whereas before, when their family first had it, it was a tongue-and-groove pine cottage box. And I think, and I mentioned to you before, even with ours, we'd be walking down the street and people would want to know, what's your last name? Not who, I'm Tyler, but what's your last name? Want to figure out if you're one of the old time residents, and then there's some sort of connection. If you're not, you're still labeled a tourist. And I think for this municipality, I almost feel like I'm a property owner. I pay taxes, right? Anytime I need something done, I call a local contractor, and we go out for dinner locally, and it's almost like I'm not part of the community. That's the attitude that I get, and I just think the whole idea behind it is wrong.
I completely agree with you. If you think about the profile of the person who needs to rent the cottage to afford it,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
that's not a generational owner usually.
No,
that is a new owner of a cottage, because they've got a mortgage to pay. They got expenses that are significant to carry. So by having this bylaw, I don't think it was really thought through as you're affecting people who are either immigrants or economically challenged. But that is the demographic of people who choose to rent out their. Listen, Tyler, if I had no mortgage on the place, and it was owned by my grandpa, and it was given to me through inheritance,
you wouldn't rent it out.
I wouldn't rent it out.
No, me neither.
Do I want strangers in my home? That was as I said, my only property, my only home. Do I really want people sleeping in my beds?
Yeah.
And if I have the choice of not to do it, I'm not going to do it.
I say that to my wife all the time. I would rather have our friends and family, hey, we're not using it. Why don't you guys go up there and enjoy? All right. I would agree. And I think that the other thing here is that things change. Okay. And I think that that's what they're missing, is that these patterns are changing. Housing affordability has gone through the roof. Okay. So for the people that are fortunate to own one property, let alone 2 as a vacation property, is going down. It doesn't happen very often. All right. And for those people to afford that property, they need to rent that out. They need to subsidize if they want that property. And all this is doing is squeezing those people out and bringing in a clientele with more money. And that, it's like, so I hate going back to this economic model, but essentially this bylaw is squeezing people out now that might have afforded it with a rental, can't.
Yep.
And now people more affluent with more money are coming in, and that's who they're appeasing to now. So and that'll happen, right? Now we have strict bylaws. You can come to Tiny, you can buy your cottage, you can spend $3 million, and I feel like that's the part that people are missing. So even residential in town, okay, Toronto, even in our community here in Wellington County, apartments now because of affordability, they're changing what we can do on our single family residential homes. So even the city of Guelph here, you can put in an apartment now. Before you needed 2 side-by-side parking, right? They changed that out of the bylaw, and now you just need 2 parking. Can be back to back.
Yep.
Okay, or no parking at all, because some people use public transit. Yep. So they're changing that because of certain trends with affordability and housing.
Garden suites, right?
ADUs. I got that here. We have ADUs now. So I live out in the country, I could have a secondary residence built on my property that's legal, that I could rent. It's not just an in-law suite anymore. It's anybody can rent it. And now we have all these vacation places that they're essentially going the opposite way. And I think that's a big issue, and I think that's not really talked about.
Completely agree with you, and you veered us into the economic angle. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Think about an average cottage owner that is seeing their place kind of begin to get run down a bit, and the siding is off, the deck is rotting, the bathrooms need updating. Holy moly, $10,000 to update just my bathroom. The roof needs 20 grand. The driveway's cracking, 50 grand, whatever the cost is. How am I going to afford it? Well, maybe I could by renting it out occasionally. Now that you're seeing this bylaw come into effect, that option is no longer either feasible or practical if you just need to $3,000 or $2,500 just to get it, and all the inspections I'm not going to pass. So that option is off the table. So guess what? Yeah, maybe we update our roof next year. Maybe the driveway can wait for a couple of more years. Maybe the bathroom doesn't need renovation. What does that do? So that's on a single individual scale. Multiply that by 600-700 properties, which is 20% of Tiny's homes, which is a sizable chunk. All of a sudden, that construction activity, that improvement activity, renovation activity plummets.
Yes.
Jobs go with it, right? There's companies that are trying to make a buck doing driveways. Not anymore, because there's no way to return that money for the homeowner through renting it out.
Yes.
And so you could see it individually. It's hard to see it holistically, but of course it happens because people en masse decide not to renovate this year, or decide to postpone it, or decide not to do it at all.
Yeah. And again, economics. The people with more money, okay, are the ones that are least affected by this. Mm-hmm. If you limit the amount of short-term rentals in an area, right? 600 to 700, they admitted it themselves. They limit it to, what'd you say, 150 right now?
300 limit, but right now
300 limit, 150. All right. You have people in the community that aren't on the waterfront, okay, that aren't vacationers or seasonal, okay, that are losing out. You have wood sales, okay. You have handymen. Mm-hmm. You have people that are in the town of Midland and in the town of Penetang that rely on that traffic coming through. Even somebody sitting on the driveway that does the garage sales. All that stuff is pizza stores, restaurants. Everything is pulled shops, back, by the way. Yeah. And I think that's what's lost here as well. And so I agree with you in the sense it's almost like, hey, these municipalities are like, let's jump on this short-term bylaw because they always look for money. All right, I have a big issue with a business. Like it'd be like me. If I want more money, I just charge my homeowners more. Right? It's easy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So I always have an issue with that because the only way the township can make money is by increasing taxes or starting another program similar to this STR. And so I think it affects just more than the cottage owners, but the whole community as a whole. And it only really protects the people that are either longstanding cottage owners, people with a ton of money that can tear these down and build these $5 and $6 million places that aren't going to put that influx of cash in the community because there's such a small minority group that have so much pull with the township and the mayor.
That's right. It's completely unfair, completely decimating the economy of Tiny, the real estate market in Tiny. Of course, people are now selling.
Yeah.
And there's a selling pressure on houses. You know what happens when that takes place. Property values sink. So, it's for politicians, it's very easy to see the actual revenue coming in. It's very difficult to see the back end costs that are rising because of the new taxes or in the new fees that they're putting in. And the smarter townships that might listen to this podcast and say, hang on a second, this is going to impose a significant cost on our community and a significant economic impact on our community. Let's actually pull back and allow the community to grow, to gain more tax revenue through economic growth rather than through the mill rate, increasing that. So that's the smart progressive communities, those who refuse to embrace change or those who refuse to look at the secondary impacts of their policies are going to go and do what Tiny did.
Yeah. It's a protectionist mindset, right? So. And like I said, now the everyday cottage owner, right? I would argue 95% of them need the income. They need to rent it out because the cost of everything, even to Tiny Township, they're increasing the mill rate. The taxes are going to go up. That's another cost. Yep. And I know people don't care, but and for you have a strong sense of right and wrong, right? But to me, it's like when we look at what's happening in our economy today, and we look at affordability, and every politician talks about affordability, right? But when we get down to the municipal level, and this isn't just Tiny Township, this is everywhere, right? They don't seem to have any insight. There's no motivation for them to even stop. So even in our community here, the tax rates, the mill rate's going to go up. Not just property values go up, and then the taxes go up as a result. Now the actual rate of those taxes are going up. So when we talk about even affordability, I just think that they need more compassion for everyday people out there. We talked about speed cameras, and everything is still going and increasing when we have all this stuff going on. So to me, I'm a big critic of that kind of stuff, because I think reckless spending, no matter if it's your local government or your federal government, you wouldn't do that in our households, and I don't think we should do that there. But I feel like there's not enough compassion with that type of stuff, and these bylaws here are case in point.
Completely agree with you. I think we're on the same page. Ironically, in the case of Tiny Township, they thought that they would bring in revenue, so 1,500 times 300 licenses. So they're going to bring in $450,000 in revenue from these licenses. So they staffed up. They hired a whole bunch of people. They got a car, and lo and behold, less than 300 applied. So they went in reserve funds from the general revenue and reserve to fund the difference. Fewer people applied the next year, so they went more reserve. And then this year it's half. So their costs are at $500,000 or so, 450 plus cars and software licenses. The revenues are about 225,000.
Yeah.
So they're actually losing money by doing this. So how, I'm going to say incompetent, do you have to be to lose money on charging somebody $1,750 and doing very little work behind the scenes to do that? Yeah. So it's been such a disaster for them. Nobody's ever going to admit it.
They're not listening to people like that. They should listen to those numbers right away and say, hey, you know what? Maybe it's almost like we're doubling down, and it's
justifying their decision.
It's a gambler that's just and to me, it's ego. It's not like they're like, hey, we've put in this, and once again, if they've done something that does not work, they should have enough foresight, respect, maturity, whatever you want to call it, to say this doesn't work. The intent was great, but this doesn't work. Let's scrap it, make adjustments, or move on.
So many and such high egos in that place. I'm not going to name names. People know. But, people running around parading this bylaw to other municipalities as if it's a success. And by every measure, it's an absolute failure.
Yes. And because you can see it. There's no numerical numbers that show any success at all, other than just pissing people off and forcing people to move out. That's right. So let's talk about your situation. So, have you applied for a bylaw or for an STR?
We have not.
Okay.
No.
So what's happened as a result?
So let's get into the kind of the legal side of it. When a municipality passes a bylaw, you have about a year to challenge the bylaw in Superior Court of Ontario. And so when we got wind of this happening, we started to assemble a group of people that rent and that want to oppose the bylaw. And we formed an association called Responsible Hosts of Tiny to band together to pool money to fund the legal challenge. And so in March of 2023, I believe, we hired a lawyer and we put in a challenge into the Superior Court. We said to the municipality right off the bat, folks, this is going to go into courts if you don't actually sit down with us and figure out a compromise. They thought we were bluffing. They thought we were intimidating them through legal means. But all we wanted to do is actually sit down. I gave a presentation to council to say, let's just pause this for a second. Let's just pause enforcement. And let's talk about what's reasonable. So we talked about all the unreasonable things. We would have found a compromise.
Of course.
But they outlined, completely refused. They voted to not pause enforcement, so they went ahead with the bylaw as is. So we had no choice. We went the legal route, and we filed that application. Because of the technicalities of how the enforcement works, if you're not at the land tribunal, the bylaw is still in effect. It's not paused by the application. So they chose to charge individual people with operating without a license. Those those are our members who chose not to apply, including ourselves. And so we got a charge and summons to court in 2023. Yeah, and I think it's 2023. And so when we went to the provincial court, which administers these tickets for not getting a license, the Justice of Peace agreed with the argument that we put forward to say, hang on a second, the bylaw is being challenged. It might be illegal.
Yeah.
If you convict us now of this infraction, you're going to have conflicting rulings. One is a person who is charged and convicted of a bylaw that is no longer valid. So that is the reason why these tickets for not having a license have been in the court system for years now, just waiting for the ruling on the Superior Court to come down. Earlier this year, it did. Unfortunately, the judge did not side with us. Lots of errors in judgment, lots of error in application of the law. So we have hired another firm to appeal it. And we're currently waiting for the appeal to be heard for the Court of Appeals in Ontario, which is the highest jurisdiction court in Ontario. And we're hoping that we're going to have the courts see it our way.
When is that?
So we filed the application in the summer based on the backlog. I think we're tracking to December, maybe January of 2026. So December 2025, January 2026. And we're hoping that the bylaw will come crashing down, or parts of the bylaw, and then those tickets become kind of meaningless.
Nullified, yeah.
If it doesn't, then we're going to have to fight each ticket individually on the merits. The evidence that they've got against us is so patchy and so horrible that I think we've got a very, very strong case to fight off individual tickets. But if we do end up losing, then we have to evaluate as a family, what do we do? Do we get a license? Do we sell? Do we move? Do we stop renting? And a reasonable person in court would say the objective here is to gain compliance, not to punish somebody, especially when the process was
protested,
and it's there's no foul play here. It's all fair. We were trying to figure out whether the law is legal, the bylaw is legal or not. So we'll deal with those tickets at some point in time later in the year.
So then, so then the tickets themselves, right? So is there a cost? Is there a price on those tickets?
They summon you to court, and then it's based on the whim of the prosecutor how much they want to charge you.
So then there's not they don't have a set, like the municipality, Tiny Township, doesn't have a set fee structure.
No.
Is there any particular reason why?
No, not that I am aware of.
So then with yours, is your house in your personal name, or your cottage in your personal name?
Mine
house.
And my wife's, yes.
And
so the just to double click on that. They charged both of us, and they consider those two separate offenses.
Okay. So the double dip.
Can you imagine, if we had 10 owners, for example, fractional ownership, are they going to charge 10 people and then have 10 times the fines?
Yeah.
We have a member whose corporation has been charged, so the house is under a corporation. They charge the corporation. They charge the owners of that corporation as well.
So if there's 2 owners, 1 corporation, there's 3 tickets for the same offense.
Correct. Wow. So this is the equivalent of a Pepsi truck parking illegally, getting issued a ticket, and then that ticket is then passed on to every shareholder of the Pepsi Corporation to be paid. So it's not $40; it's $40 billion.
But it's not even divided between the owners. It's the same ticket for every single owner.
Correct.
It's not joint.
No, correct. So, and they want to multiply the fines based on the ownership structure.
I'm shocked.
So there's no actual business acumen to understand that a corporation exists to protect the liability of the owners, right? One of the reasons corporations exist is to limit liability. So if you charge a corporation, you can't charge the owners.
That's right.
Yet they did it, and they're hoping that they'll stick.
And I mean, I'm curious on the reasoning behind that, right? Like if somebody's obviously they're consulting with somebody, and is it like let's just throw it all at them to see if it sticks with one person?
I don't know the rationale. I think it's just lack of business acumen, to be honest with you. I'm just right.
So as a result of these bylaws, you've got together with owners, and you guys have started the Responsible Hosts of Tiny Township.
Yeah.
Who's combating that? Is it just the township? Is there another full-time owners that have gotten together or anything like that? It's just Responsible Hosts of Tiny Township, and you guys are fighting.
Correct. So they have we're the applicant, they are the defender, I guess, or respondent. Sorry, I should say, and they've got their legal team who is fighting us. Unlimited funds on the township's end, limited funds on our end. Yeah. So the battle is not quite symmetrical. I'll tell you one more detail of this, the absurdity of this township and how they handle themselves. Because we lost the original case back in March, there's a cost award that's associated with it. So they've asked for $48,000 in legal fees for us to pay them. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think the judge said 38. So you could say, okay, fine. The appellant lost. But the tricky accounting part of it, Tyler, is in the $1,750 of license fee that you pay, already incorporated in that, we have it in writing from one of the counselors, legal costs associated with the enforcement of the bylaw.
Yes. So those fees are already being paid or already accounted for.
So those members who chose to apply for a license are paying for this now twice. Once through their the license fee, and once through the cost award. So the township has gotten enough money through the license fees to fund their lawyers, and yet they're seeking money from us now to double dip on those legal fees. Well,
and I always felt like even the ability to get costs, for the township to get costs, is an injustice for the people as well, because then it stops anybody in the future from going after some arbitrary bylaw, because now they're like, it's going to cost us, look what happened with Glen, it's going to cost us $48,000. So I always thought that's like, and I've noticed even our township around here, they don't want to fight something because of liability, and that liability suggests that if they fight a private company and the company can come back and ask them for costs. Mm-hmm. So it goes against the liability there as well. So anybody that has a problem with their township, if they want to fight it, they have to know that there's a potential that they're going to be charged. Big money.
For sure. We are appealing the cost award as well. So I think there are errors. I don't think the judge actually read the double dipping argument, honestly. Yeah, because if as a rational person, if you see that the township's being paid by both sides, then you're only entitled to one. Here is another kicker, Tyler, for you.
Go ahead.
In the provincial court ticket fines, here at 0 point, there's no set fine. The prosecutor has said that they want to make back the money that they spent on enforcing this bylaw. Again, so they're triple dipping.
Yeah.
So they're going to set fines on the basis of how much it costs them to prosecute us. Yeah. So this is again, you keep using the word absurdity. The absurdity of how this township operates. You're not actually fining the behavior or the offense. You are hoping to get money on what it cost you as a township to go after it.
But in what world? Like, you get a speeding ticket, you fight the speeding ticket. They don't go back and say, okay, well, the clerk costs this, it costs money for the police officers, all of this jointly costs us $10,000. You're going to have a $10,000 ticket.
That's exactly what they're
doing. You have
a
legal right to fight it. Here, they're just bullying you with fines and money. And unfortunately, in today's society, it works because nobody fights it. So I guess for my question then for you is in terms of the fines, that would set precedent.
If they convict us, the interesting part is that there was a couple of people who sold their property at the very beginning of the process. They were fined. They were summoned. They came to the court. They said, we don't want to dispute it. We just want to pay. They ended up charging them $250 each.
So that's the precedent.
One would think, again, it's two people. Why two owners? It makes no sense. But at least that is the ballpark.
But you're getting fined for exercising, a democratic right to fight a bylaw. Yeah, exactly. But if the other ones were $250, but since you decided to fight it, now yours is going to be a portion of the cost that it takes to fight it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I think having a ticket with no dollar value on it is, like, I find that absurd. All right, that they can just say, hey, well, it is what it is. When we figure out what that ticket is, then you're just going to have to pay it. Mm-hmm. And then of course it brings me to my next point here is we talked about this before, was the AMPs. Okay. So I don't know, has Tiny Township enacted AMPs for this particular bylaw?
And just to double click on that, administrative monetary penalties, right?
Administrative monetary penalties. So that was the province allowing that in 2019, right? So municipalities can implement, they call them AMPs, administrative monetary penalties, up to $100,000, I believe, per offense.
I don't think so. I think it was meant for low value offenses, like $100, and then they removed the limit.
And the verbiage on that is to change behavior. So as long as the township can prove that it's changing a certain behavior, then they're allowed to penalize people based on that, without
due process.
Due process.
Yeah. So they have not instituted AMPS, whatever you want to call it, on this bylaw, but it's certainly in the works. We've heard
make it easier.
We saw it for sure. We saw the documents by the council that they're exploring it. Other townships have done it, but I don't know how much they've actually enforced it. And of course, to the point of no due process, when you disagree with a charge, you go and talk to a clerk in the township who's paid by the township and say, I disagree with the charge. And they are the arbiter of whether you are guilty or not. And so, you plead your case. Their boss is the CAO who runs the township. So there's no chance in hell that they're going to side with you.
No.
Rather than their employer who pays their check. So I would suspect that 100% or close to it of all the fines would be upheld by that clerk. So when you disagree with that decision, then you go to an arbitrator who is supposedly independent to get the same hearing. Guess who the arbitrator is paid by?
The township.
The township. And so if they side with too many homeowners, they're going to get a different arbitrator.
So and to me, like we talk about democratic process, I would agree that this is not democratic in any inch of it. But So for everybody out there that's looking at it, you'd look at these and say, well, yeah, okay, then the township gets to find these people. What's the big deal? It's very similar to a speeding camera, right? They just I mentioned speeding cameras because we just put one up in our community. And same thing. If you fight it, you go to a clerk. If you want to fight the clerk, you pay more money, and then you go to another arbitrator who is paid for by the same county, right? So it's a conflict in itself. Now everybody would look at this and say, okay, $100 fine, $200 fine, $300 fine. Tyler, what's the point? The point is that the AMPs, there's either a $100,000 limit or there's no limit. But I encourage people to go through and look at Wainfleet, and there's reports of homeowners like consecutive, right, and they're fined $10,000 a piece on infractions for STRs. Mm-hmm. They're fined, like, there's reports, now I don't know how true they are, but there's reports of people having over $160,000 in fines on their rental properties. Yep. And they can't fight them. They just, like, you go to the clerk, and unless there's a clerical error, unless you have problems paying it, they're not going to dismiss that charge.
The content itself is not really disputable.
That's right. So there's nothing to dispute, mm-hmm. right? And even there's been reports that they were fining people $5,000 for having an ad up that was activated. Like, you know, sometimes with Airbnb, I've even had it myself, where you'll put it up and your ad will be. It'll be activated. You'll disable it, but then it gets activated, some sort of bug, and then it comes online. And those people are fined for even advertising it without even having proof that they've committed the offense. And on that note as well, we have job postings that people will. I've had job postings up for years that I can't get off people's sites because another site will take that data, mm-hmm. pull that data so they can bring more people to their site. And that's happening, and you realistically cannot even get it off without fighting some company in the U.S. or Indonesia or wherever. And I find there's no leeway for that at all. So I worry that with Tiny Township, and I'd encourage everybody out there to look at AMPs. It's a scary process where you can be charged thousands and thousands of dollars without having due process. And if Tiny Township, hopefully I'm not giving them any ideas, but if they input these AMPs, you know, it's over for short-term rentals in the township.
I think it'll happen. All the signals are there that it will happen. Maybe they're waiting for this court process to wrap up to do it, right? Because I think even for them that would be too egregious to impose penalties while the bylaw is being challenged. I think once it's complete, they'll absolutely do it.
Yeah, and the township's reasoning is that it gets away with all this court stuff and expenses, and they can expedite this process, but it's not a fair hearing whatsoever. No. And I know Doug Ford's talking about getting rid of speed cameras. I hope he gets rid of the whole AMP system, because I think it's, once again, I mean, you'll go through, what's right and wrong, but for me too, I go back to affordability in today's day and age where everything is so high, and the townships have no problem charging a homeowner $10,000 per offense. It's it's very similar reports that it's two separate owners on one title that are getting charged separately.
You got to go back to why the justice system exists in the first place, and the blind lady that's holding the scale, right? And you have to be impartial. You have to give due process. That's one of the tenets of our legal system. I understand with the fines are insignificant, $30, $40 or parking ticket, and those are the ones that clog up the court systems. So the more serious crimes then are not being heard. I can understand it, and I think that's why the province had a limit at first of $100. Yeah. But now that they've removed that limit, it just created this torrent of power that the municipalities have undertaken, where they just can bypass any sort of judicial hearing, any sort of impartial person looking at the case, and
with a monetary policy.
A huge monetary effect.
Yeah, like not 300, not 500, not 1,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I have a really tough time with that. And I think it's a little bit overreach by some of these communities to input that. They've had votes on that on our township about the AMPs. Yeah. And sometimes when you look at egos on bylaw enforcements or mayors, they're like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. That's what we want. And realistically, nobody has the money to fight it. So essentially what's happening is the everyday citizen that could fight their tickets now need, not only are they getting tickets that are thousands of dollars, they need thousands of dollars to fight it.
Now you could say an opponent of your argument would say, just don't break the law.
Yeah.
But of course, again, the legal system exists in the first place to arbitrate difficult cases, and sometimes there are nuances to breaking the law. Sometimes you park because you have a child with special needs and he's bleeding in the back of the car, and you just need to park by the side of the road to get him to the hospital.
Yeah.
And you get a ticket. In a fair justice system, you can explain that to a judge and say, listen, first ticket, extreme emergency.
Yeah.
Go easy on me. Of course, that ticket would be dismissed. In this case, you're completely taking away any kind of nuance.
Yeah.
And you're always guilty because the government says you're guilty.
Well, exactly. And I think the problem is with property ownership in these communities is that if you get a ticket for $10,000 one year and then you get a ticket for $10,000 another year, they'll tack it onto your taxes.
Of course.
Right? So then for anybody out there that, if you're in tax arrears, I think it's 3 years arrears or something, and then the municipality can file to force a sale. And then they can actually force a sale to get their money out of your property. So essentially, what they've done, they haven't only limited their bylaws, but they've actually kicked you out. There you go, you're a non-issue. And they do that all based on money.
And again, an opponent would say, oh, you're describing an extreme scenario. That doesn't happen. But it's happening in Wainfleet.
It is.
And the municipalities now have the tools to make it happen. And so it's just a matter of time before it does.
It is, because it's like, well, you see it all over. It's like one STR bylaw, the next STR bylaw, Muskoka, everywhere now. And then all of a sudden, AMP. And then I find, a lot of Canadians are really laxed in the sense that they just don't want to fight these or take the time to do that, or what's the big deal. And the big deal is that, they're taking away due process for people that want to be able to fight issues that are coming up in their community. And for a township to have that much power to just say, like for them to enact a bylaw, right, they need a majority from the councillors, right? So typically there's 5-6 councillors.
Tiny, it's 4 and a mayor.
Okay, so you have 4 and a mayor, so you need 3 votes to enact a bylaw.
Yep.
For everybody in the whole township.
I guess their ears are open from all kinds of vested interests, and all it takes is to convince 3 people to do this to the township.
Well, and I think, to me, just with my experience with Tiny, applying for the permit, it's like everything takes so long, and then they're all in one office, right? There's only, they've got like the building department, and then you got your STR, there's 4 people all in the same building. And you have an issue with one, they're like, well, that's the building department. That's the STR department. They can't just go and walk over to their neighbor and say, hey, do you think we could kind of figure this out now? No, you got to send an email because you can't get a hold of them by phone. All right? They'll never answer the phone first ring. Okay? And then whenever you leave a message, whenever you do an email, you can expect minimum 24 hours for someone to get back to you. So you're talking to somebody on Monday, you don't hear back until, Wednesday, Tuesday evening at the latest, Wednesday, and then you respond back. It's another 24 hours. So by the time it's all done, you're a week to figure out one question that could have been done by knocking on their neighbor's door. And I find that township, they're not working together in that respect. And like I just noticed from us and applying for our permit, it's taken a long time. And then we did ask them. We had one person that said, okay, well, you need another permit, but we're going to grant you a temporary STR, but you need something with the building department. And then he goes away on paternity leave, and nobody knows anything about it. Yeah. And then they're like, and then you talk to the STR, and they're like, no, they wouldn't. No one would allow you to do that. And then you have to get angry, and you make a big complaint, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, we have record of it over here, but nobody. They're just like, well, that you'd have to talk to building. Building doesn't know about it. So-and-so's on mat leave. Go back to the STR. And that was our experience. And even it got to a point where we still don't have a license. And I said, well, do we have to reapply and do all this again next year? And they said, well, yes, but it'll be easier next year. And then, but I said, well, like we've only got, it's not approved now. So October, November, December, 3 months. $1,750. Mm-hmm. And I said, do we get some sort of break for next year on that? Well, you'll have to, the short term, the SDR body says, well, you'll have to talk to so-and-so about that. I can't deal with that. Building department can't deal with that. So nobody can make a decision on it. And as opposed to saying, you know what, we're having a lot of issues. We're having a lot of people protest these. You know what, Tyler, we're going to change it where you'll pay for the 3 months and then you'll do $1,750 for the next year. There's no leeway. There's no compassion in these departments. No. And one of my biggest, and I'm ranting here, but one of my biggest things is we needed a septic a septic calculation to figure out the capacity to see if we could have the short-term rental with 4 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms. And we couldn't. That calculation is a Ontario. It's in the Ontario Building Code, so it's not Tiny Township built like it's an Ontario Building Code regulation. So any septic technician could have done that calculation in the province of Ontario because it's the same. Okay, but the Tiny Township forces you to use Tatum Engineering, and they're the ones that have to determine the capacity of that tank. And it's 2 years old. It's brand new, right? It took them over 15 business days. So over 3 weeks, it was like 17 business days for them to give me a calculation that takes an hour from some other company. But they wouldn't take from a licensed septic technician or installer, they wouldn't take anything about that. And that was, to me, it's like, that's 3 weeks. I'm waiting for that for 3 weeks.
3 weeks of lost
ink, revenue, like right in the middle of the summertime, and then you have then you sent out to the building department and said, well, why wouldn't you just apply for the permit without having that? And we said, well, because we were advised to make sure that the capacity was there before applying for the permit. And they said, well, now you're 3 weeks behind. So I have such a hard time because I honestly feel like the township for us is, maybe not inadvertently, but through their process, it's weeks. And even now, we have a mutual agreement on we'll get a approval for the 3-bedroom, and that was last Wednesday, and I still haven't heard back from them at all. And now that was the building department, and then I've got the short-term rental department messaging me asking us where are you guys going to go? Where do you want to proceed? So they're just not even
so uncoordinated.
It's so uncoordinated, and it's not a big township, right? So I just think, well, it's not just about the bylaw. They just don't really. There's no urgency to get it for these people.
It feels sometimes as if it's by design.
They don't care.
For SDRs particularly, feels as if it's by design to delay and to stifle your ability to get the information or the permits that you need. So
I guess have you had like you've obviously at the time the bylaw came in, you'd have landlords and short-term advocates fighting for it, but you'd also have homeowners fighting against it. Yeah. Have you had any discussion with the homeowners, or has there been any groups that have during at the height where we've got a problem with COVID, we live here and these buggers are dumping garbage, peeing all over the place, smashing bottles, and now COVID's kind of dissipated. Like, is that still a thing? Are these guys still fighting at the township meetings? Are people like?
I think we never met with those folks because they were always working through council, through the relationships.
Yeah.
Right. I think they're called Good Neighbors Alliance or something like that.
Is that is that just like a Facebook group?
It's a Facebook group. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not an organization, from what I understand. I don't know, they may have formed a corporation. But it's a handful of people, like 5 to 10 people max. Imagine the fervor that you must have to go after people like me. Like, that's your, I understand, you understand why I fight, because like we invested a whole bunch of money, we're hampered by this, but why do they fight? How strongly do you have to feel about something happening in your neighborhood to be actively there protesting? So what actually happens is the profile of these people, they're extremely antagonistic, I found, and irrational. Now, some of them are okay. In fact, the one of the key members of that group has recently said that he was wrong. The bylaw needs to be changed because they overshot it and they didn't do it right. To his credit.
Yeah.
But nobody's listening to him anymore.
No.
And so, because the calories are being spent elsewhere, be it on the municipal building, be it on the shoreline bylaw, we've all gotten forgotten, but we're still living with the effects of that.
That's right, and I mean, I think part of the issue is that if you're against, short-term bylaws, and this Facebook group, whatever it's called, the Alliance, the Homeowners Alliance, if they're fighting it, and I guess the township makes a proposal for the bylaw, there's other ways to skin a cat. There's other ways to try to stop the problems that they're having. And I think there's a lot simpler ways to do it. This is almost just like let's puff our chests up, and this is the mayor that stopped short-term bylaws in Tiny Township for good, and he's going to get reelected, and yada yada yada.
The irony is that the bylaw was passed, I think, as the election was taking place in 2022.
Yeah. And
so it was created by the old guard, the old council.
Yeah.
And so the new council came in, and they had all the opportunity to actually say, no. Hold on, pause. It wasn't done right. They campaigned with us. We interviewed as an association through Zoom calls every candidate, and we got out of them promises that they're going to change the bylaw, relook at the bylaw. Mayor said, I used to rent, my grandpa used to rent, so I fully empathize with you guys. And so we're going to look at this bylaw. We're going to change it. We're going to see what doesn't work.
So it was a new mayor.
It was a new mayor who came in and inherited the very, very new bylaw. It could have done anything with it. They did not have to hold it up. Administration stayed the same. And I think it's the administration's baby that is now the bylaw.
So like what do they call that? The CAO or the
CAO?
CAO, yeah. And then and that's interesting too to note with the townships is that sometimes it's not the mayor, like the councilors and the mayor, they don't really have much control over the CAO and what they do. They can influence them and grease their wheel, but they're really viewed as a separate entity because they can't fire them, right? The mayor can't fire the CAO.
I think they can.
I think it's the CAO that can fire. I don't think the mayor can.
Yeah, the council can fire the CAO, but then the CAO can fire everybody else.
Yes. Yeah. So
performance manager.
That's right. Yeah. So if there's somebody in the building department, the council can't fire them, but they could. But if they fire the CAO has their contracts of 3 years or 5 years. So a lot of the times they either just run it out and look for another one.
But this was a completely new council. They're wet ears, never been in politics. I think one of the councillors was reelected, but 4 completely new. So when they came in, kind of, all right, CEO, what's the lay of the land? Tell us. They had no idea how to govern. They had no idea how to be politicians, and so I think they were influenced by the administration to keep this going. And then once they made that choice, then they had to justify it and stick to it.
I honestly think there's an easy way for the township to do this that's way more cost effective and that adds more influx in cash to their community. Excuse me, I really do. And I
tell what would be. I mean, air it out.
Well, like to me, like I said before, right? You would have registrations on the rent, registrations on the because you could still charge. You say $100 registration, but you could still say $500 registration. You could still charge a registration fee on an individual person that's going to rent them, whether it's like you have like freaking hotels give you a recycle tax or whatever of $100 or whatever it is, mm-hmm. And so you could easily have something like that that's built in. Airbnb charges, maybe the township could run a separate. You can't use Airbnb, you use our rental site, or these are registered rentals and this is who you can use. Like, there's other ways to do it, but I think the biggest thing here is that if there is that 1% that's causing the problem, it's the 1% you need to go after. And those monetary policies would be great in doing that.
Completely agree.
Right? So before, I guess a couple things. When are you going to run for council?
Oh, I'm not running for council.
Okay. and actually, let's just quickly, how long are we in, Kyle?
Hour 34.
Oh. That goes quick,
eh?
Told you.
Yeah, good stuff here, guys.
It's awesome. You got it? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I get, and then on that, can you just dive into, not to poo-poo on the Tiny Township too much, okay? But like, it's funny because I go there when I go to Tiny and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like I drive up, I can go through Airport Road from here, jog up through Stainer and around Wasaga, or I can go through Barrie and up to 400 and north and stop off in Wayville and get my soft serve ice cream that's like this big.
Jug City, right?
Right? Yes, Jug City. And one size fits all, so even the 3-year-old gets an ice cream this big. There's the zoo, there's paintball in Wasaga. You can go into the stores, like they have, like we love the Butter Tart Festival. There's so much stuff.
The beaches. You forgot the beaches.
Yeah, I got my own.
Oh yeah.
We're on an inland lake, right? But like,
but
you're right. You go to Bomb Beach. You've got the restaurant with the 2-story decks. I mean, every part of that is just you're when you're there and you're looking at it, you're like, wow. I'm privileged. Life is good, and then on the second time of it, you just feel like you're getting squeezed out at the same time, and it's such an unfortunate thing to do because there's so much value in that community. I think everybody should experience Tiny Township. With that said, you mentioned shoreline bylaws and stuff like that. I just want to; those have coming in around the same time, right? Yep. With the same council.
Yep.
Just touch in a little bit about those before we go.
I don't know the specifics. I know they're extremely restrictive on shoreline development. And the objective, I think, is to protect beaches, protect the habitat around the beaches. I get that. But again, just like with the SDR bylaw, you can overdo it.
Yeah.
And so I think anything within 75 meters of the shore, which is most properties, most shoreline properties. We're not on the beach, but most shoreline properties are that. You can't do any development. Like you can't dig a post. You can't put a garden shed. You can't do anything without permits. And of course, if you're getting permits, then the power goes back to the municipality around whether you issue a permit or not.
Yeah. And
then you're completely constrained around what you can do on your property. Can't put a basketball net into the ground because that's development. Can't build a retaining wall because the side of your house is crumbling. Can't do anything without the government, in this case township, interfering in it and making a decision.
And but it conflicts though. Like you had a bunkie on anything under 108 square feet doesn't need a permit. But now it does.
I think it does. I'm not sure about that specific case, but I think it does. Now it's 15 square meters, so the province has increased the size of the bunkies. Not in Tiny, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I always thought it like different forms of like conservation. So like our lake, when I look at it's not a conservation controlled lake. So Rockwood here, we have the Rockwood Conservation Area. Yeah. Grand River Conservation Area is in control of that. Our lake, if I look at the registry on it, it says Her Majesty the Queen, And I found it interesting because when we bought it, when we started doing the research and we started saying, okay, what can we do to the shoreline? What can't we do to the shoreline? They were a lot more lenient here than they would be, Georgian Bay, for instance. Mm-hmm. And, in that particular case, we could, you could do your retaining walls. You could add sand in. There's people but it had to be a native sand, to the area. Mm-hmm. So there was a few things that you could do within reason. And it was so it's not all water bodies aren't the same. All right.
Yeah, I think they're worried about the beaches and Georgian Bay Strip and around the peninsula, and so that's where the majority of the restrictions are targeted. But again, it's not my battle to fight.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm committing a sin, just like people go, it's not my battle to fight SDRs, so I don't really care.
Yeah.
I need to pay attention. It's my battle to fight that. But I think objectively, if you look at that bylaw, if you look at the township town center, it's another issue, right?
Yeah. Which
you can spend an hour and a half or 2 hours on talking.
Well, because they're increasing the taxes as a result to build that, right?
Of course. And they did, supposedly calculations. It's like $65 per year per average house. That's not what we're seeing in actual life, right?
No.
This is what the bill of goods that you've been sold, and
it'll
the
be
reality.
Quadruple.
Yeah.
But I guess so one of the things that stood out to me when you and I were first talking was, I said, well, geez, can you believe they're doing this with affordability? And you said, no, it's not about that. It's about, what's right. Mm-hmm. And they're really they're really infringing on their powers here. Mm-hmm. And it was more of for you, it's more of what's right and what's wrong. Can you just touch on that for a little bit? To me, I look at you, you've immigrated to this country. You've, in one of the biggest cities that we have here, you've survived, you've thrived, you're fighting for this Canadian dream. You've bought this cottage or house, whatever you want to call it. And, all of a sudden now it's like, well, no. Now now that's in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. And that's the whole reason for this fight is they're trying to take something away from you. We live in a free country here. Can you just touch on that a little bit for yourself?
I guess this brings us back full circle to almost to the start of the conversation. I was born in the Soviet Union, where government controlled everything. Yeah. Property rights did not exist. I don't think you could own private property, or you could in some cases, but you couldn't own a business. You couldn't really own houses, and we know what that led to as a society: extreme, totalitarian regime, communism, and so on. Escape that, looking for the quote-unquote American dream in Canada, Canadian dream, where you can be whoever you want to be. You can buy a house, you can own a business, you can run down the road in your underpants and nobody will stop you. Mm-hmm. There's no police state, there's no overreach when I arrived here in 1990. What I'm seeing here now is small steps and sometimes large leaps towards a state where the government has so much control of your life that as an individual you begin to matter less and less and less and don't matter at all. And so your commercial nature is being stifled. Your what you can do with your property, be it a basketball court or renting it out, is being restricted. What you can build on your property is being restricted. And those individual steps in and of themselves seem like a good idea. Well, it's in the name of safety. It's in the name of fairness. It's in the name of whatever objectives that you want to put in. But collectively, just like the terms of the bylaw, individually they might make sense a little bit on the surface, but collectively, we're moving as a society to a place where you are being constrained, and more as an individual, giving me flashbacks of my youth where you couldn't do those things, and the only option you had was to leave. You couldn't resist. And so just like we talked about AMPS, you couldn't resist. Just like we talked about this process, you couldn't resist. This is giving me that vibe. When you mentioned affordability, and you said especially when people are struggling.
Yeah.
Well, yes, timing matters, but if something is wrong, absolutely, it's wrong. It doesn't matter what the timing is. It doesn't matter whether it's, okay today, not okay tomorrow, maybe. But if something is wrong and right, there's absolute measures of that. And I think what they're doing in Tiny is absolutely wrong to people who own property, who try to live that Canadian dream, who try to get ahead in life, who try to be a little bit more mercantile and a little bit more creative with the way they own a house. And so it's maybe renting it out, maybe having somebody stay there. All of that is now stifled and completely constrained.
Right, and things are, you're right, and I think the big thing too, things are changing, and it's just that everybody's used to this like norm of this home ownership. You own the house, it's yours, you don't rent it out. But I do, I do appreciate that, and even you fighting for it, like. Essentially, you're fighting. You are fighting for everybody, whether or not you're fighting your own battle, but you are fighting for everybody in that defense, because if you do have a victory, the impact will be so overreaching for you.
That's the idea.
And I think that's important for a lot of people to understand.
That's the idea. And we did have a GoFundMe page, and we actually got some money from folks who are sympathetic to our cause and see the broader effect of this, and so really appreciative of those who've donated. We're just hoping for a different outcome for this appeal.
Yeah. And even that money, with you talk about the Soviet Union, a lot of that might have been done by force, where this seems to be pushed more monetarily, right? It's like the money is controlling everything, right?
And then
to get down the rabbit hole.
I did mention we were at our cottage on Father's Day 2024, I believe. I was working on the back deck or something like that, and knock on the door from bylaw, and it says, "Hi, I'm from the government, basically. Are you renting?" And so, what kind of society do we want? Do we want this to be the norm, where government comes and says, "Are you not good enough to be the owner, and are you renting, and are you breaking these renting bylaws?" Or do we want the society where government pulls back and says, "You know what, you do with your property what you want, as long as you contribute positively to the society," which is revenue, pay taxes obviously on that, bring in construction, renovation, bring in people to explore Tiny because it's so beautiful. Which Tiny and which country do we want to really live in?
That's right. And I think in closing, Georgian Bay is not only a feature for Canadians. It's recognized worldwide. The sunsets of Georgian Bay are recognized worldwide, and I think that should be available to everybody, whether it's for 2 days, 7 days, 365 days, and not just a selected group.
Completely agree with you. Tiny is such a gem. It's a hidden gem. Most people don't know about it. When I say we've got a place in Tiny, people go, "Where is that?" And I go, "Do you know Wasaga Beach?" It's just up the road from. Oh, of course we know Wasaga. So when Wasaga is well known, province is investing a lot of money into Wasaga, but Tiny is this beautiful, somewhat pristine place that is still a secret. Maybe not after this.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, Glenn, we appreciate you coming here and pouring your heart out, and I wish you luck.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Really good conversation. Looking forward to the next one.
Let's do it.
Cheers.
Okay.